بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد على قدر حبك فيه. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد على قدر عنايتك به. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد حق قدر مقداره. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة تنجينا بها من جميع الأهوال والآفات وتقضي لنا بها جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها أعلى درجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة الرضا ورضا عن أصحابه رضا والحمد لله رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah. So inshallah, continuing where we left off in the Jawhara, فخالق لعبده وما عمل موفق لمن أراد أن يصل وخاذل لمن أراد بعده ومنجز لمن أراد وعده. So lines 45 and 46, and we're talking about that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of everything, and everything includes, of course, the servant and the servant's actions, whether involuntary or voluntary. And so here, فَخَالِقٌ لِعَبْدِهِ, Allah is the creator of the servant, his servant, وَمَا عَمِلْ, and all that the servant does, all of the works or actions of the servant. So we talked about the difference of opinion on this issue and what Ahl Sunnah maintains, and the universality of Allah's qudra. This is based off of the universality of Allah's qudra. And so we discussed when we did the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sifatul ma'ani, the attribute of qudra, that its ta'alluq, its association is to what? The association of qudra, the association of divine power is to what? Is to everything that is not created, not existent, possible or consistent, contingent. Okay? The ta'alluq, the association of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power is to everything mumkin, everything that's logically possible or logically conceivable. And there is an umum, there is a generality of that ta'alluq, in that if something is mumkin, if something is logically possible, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power is associated with it. Okay, if something is logically possible, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's power is associated with it. And there is no limiting or exception to this generality. There is no limiting or exception to this generality, because limiting the scope of those associations would be a type of takhsis. Limiting the scope of those associations would be a type of takhsis. Takhsis meaning specification or determination. Specification or determination is based off of which faculty or attribute. Which attribute is one of specification or determination? Irada. So will. So someone would have to have decided and willed to limit. And so you would get into a situation that who can do takhsis, who can limit, or who can specify or determine a limit for Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is one. He is one subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there is no other deity that could have done that. So Allah's power, by definition, must be all-encompassing. It must be all-encompassing. It's associated with the mumkinat, with things contingent, rather than the wajibat or mustahilat. And we discussed this in detail. And the basis of this is the issue of the hukum aqli versus the hukum adi, a judgment that is a logical judgment versus a normative judgment. And we said that the hukum aqli is based off of conceivability. So if something is logically necessary, its non-existence is inconceivable. If something is logically impossible, its existence is inconceivable. If something is logically possible, then both its existence and non-existence are possible. And this is different from a hukm adi, from an empirically tested normative judgment. For example, the burning of fire, because you can conceive, you can imagine fire not burning. Okay, you can conceive or imagine fire not burning, and we know that the breaking of the hukm adi, the breaking of a normative judgment, or defying of a law of nature, is the basis of miracles. A miracle is that which defies a law of nature. So the miracle defies a law of nature because both the fulfillment of a law of nature and its denial are both mumkin. They're both logically possible. And so Allah Ta'ala's qudra, Allah Ta'ala's power is associated with both. And so whether having fire, creating the burning along with fire, or not creating the burning along with fire, they're both equivalent vis-a-vis the divine power. And just to clarify that perhaps we didn't phrase it this way last semester, the key to distinguishing between a logical necessity or impossibility and a normative necessity or impossibility is contradiction. Okay, contradiction. That a logical impossibility is something that entails a contradiction. It breaks Aristotle's law of non-contradiction. So affirming X and affirming not X at the same time. This is what's mustahil aqlan. This is what's logically impossible. The lack of burning with fire does not break that. Okay, the lack of burning with fire does not break that. But for example, a square that is a circle at the same time would break that, because you're affirming something being a square, and at the same time, from the same perspective, you're affirming it being a circle, which is not a square. So you've affirmed X, square, and not X, not square, for example. So that's the key to understand. How do you distinguish between a logical necessity / impossibility versus a normative, natural necessity or impossibility? Is a contradiction entailed? A logical necessity or impossibility revolves around the issue of contradiction. A necessity is such that if it were not there, you have a contradiction. And an impossibility is if it were there, you have a contradiction. Whereas with normative or habitual things in the world, natural things in the world, there's no contradiction entailed if they are broken. So laws of nature can be defied. Laws of nature can be defied because there's no contradiction. If someone started floating in the air, there's no contradiction in that, which is why it's conceivable and in fact happens, right? If water were split, if a body of water were split and you have walls of water and people could then walk through it, water going up and defying gravity, there's no contradiction in that. You're not affirming X and not X at the same time, as opposed to two deities. Trying to affirm two deities is affirming X and not X, because a deity by definition has to be one, because the deity is necessarily existent, and we discussed this in detail. So Allah Ta'ala's qudra is universal, the ta'alluqat, the associations of His qudra are universal, and this would include the actions of human beings, the voluntary actions of human beings. And we talked about that the human being has his Kesp, he has his acquisition. Okay, so the human being has the faculty of irada, has the faculty of choice. This is something that Allah creates in the human being. It is a created faculty, okay, it is a created faculty, but it is a real faculty by which the human being is able to choose. When the human being chooses one versus another decision, whether to do or not do a particular action, for example, and that choice is concretized, it's determined, it is transformed to an azm, It's transformed to a firm resolve and determination. Okay, where the intention is all the way to its finality, to its conclusion, then that is termed Kesp. That is termed Kesp, acquisition. And the person is responsible for their final internal decision. And if Allah Ta'ala then, if he had in pre-eternity also willed for whatever action the human being wills, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala creates at that moment two things. What are they? The action that the person intended, as well as a concurrent or simultaneous ability with that action. Okay? A concurrent or simultaneous ability with that action. And that ability, if the action were a good deed, something pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we called that phenomenon where Allah creates that qudra, we called it what? Tawfiq. This is what Allah Ta'ala calls tawfiq in the Quran, and as our masters have explained. But if, la qadrallah, it is an evil deed, a wrong action, then that ability and action is called khidlan. Allah's creating of it in the human is called khidlan, which is linguistically to forsake someone. To forsake someone. Khidlan is to forsake someone and leave them to their own what is eventual damnation. Wal-iyadhu billah. Tawfiq linguistically is harmony. Tawfiq linguistically is ta'lif, it's harmony. And so the idea is that when Allah Ta'ala creates the good deed in the human being with the ability that goes with that deed, there is a harmony between the human's cusp, the human's acquisition, what they intended to do, what they resolved to do, with the divine pleasure. Okay, there is a harmony between the human resolve and the divine pleasure. And this is something very profound if we were to think about it, that this harmony, really exposing ourselves to the rida of Allah Ta'ala. And so, as the line says, Imam Laqani says, Muwaffiqun, Allah gives tawfiq liman arada an yasil, for whomever Allah willed in pre-eternity that the person reaches Allah. Whoever Allah willed, man arada an yasil, that the person reaches Allah's mahabba and Allah's rida, Allah's love and good pleasure. Wa khadilun liman arada bu'da, and Allah is also the one that forsakes whomever Allah willed his distance, whomever Allah willed the person to be distant from him subhanahu wa ta'ala, i.e. incurring divine wrath and displeasure. Wal-iyadhu billah. وَمُنْجِزٌ لِمَنْ أَرَادَ وَعْدَهُ, and Allah is the fulfiller. Okay, munjizun is the one that fulfills, and the direct object of this in the line is wa'da. Allah is the fulfiller of His promise, capital H. Allah is the fulfiller of His promise. To whom does Allah fulfill His promise? Liman arad, for whomever Allah wills. And Imam Laqani, he dropped the what's implied there, whomever Allah wills good for. So the translation would be, Allah fulfills His divine promise for whomever Allah wills good for. For whomever Allah wills good for. What's the divine promise? Paradise. Okay, the divine promise is paradise and everything that is in paradise, and the divine threat is hellfire and everything in the hellfire. So the wa'd, the promise, Allah's promise is paradise and its pleasures. And the divine threat is wa'id, wa'id from the same root. The wa'id is the divine threat, which is hellfire and its torments. So Allah is munjiz. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is munjiz. He is the fulfiller of His promises. Okay, He is the fulfiller of His promise. Okay, this is based off of this is a qat'i statement. It's a definitive statement, an absolute statement based off of revelation. Okay, so Allah Ta'ala, for example, says in Surah Al-Rum, verse 6, Wa'ad Allah, the promise of Allah. لا يخلف الله وعده. Allah does not break His promise. And in Surah Al-Ra'd, verse 31, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُخْلِفُ الْمِعَادِ. The mi'ad referring to the wa'd. The mi'ad from the same root referring to the wa'd. Verily Allah does not break His promise. So, Imam Sawi says, فَوَعْدُهُ سُبْحَانَهُ عَلَى حَسْبِ مَا سَبَقَ فِي عِلْمِهِ أَزَلًا. So the divine promise is it's based on what Allah knew in pre-eternity. It's based on what Allah knew in pre-eternity. فَلَوْ جَازَ تَخَلُّفُ الْوَعْدِ. This is the proof, logical proof. So we did the proof based on revelation. Now the logical proof, and because reason, revelation, this is that's the epistemological foundation of the science. So this is now reductio ad absurdum. Okay, reductio ad absurdum. What would be entailed by the opposite, by denying this? فَلَوْ جَازَ تَخَلُّفُ الْوَعْدِ. If it were possible that the divine promise be broken, لَنْقَلَبَ عِلْمُ اللَّهِ جَهْلًا. Then the divine knowledge would be turned into, it would be deemed ignorance. وَلَزِمَ عَلَيْهِ الْكَذِبُ فِي خَبْرِهِ تَعَالَى. And then it would also entail lying in His statement, because He revealed that He does not break His promise. So that would be a lie. And وَكِلَاهُمَا مُسْتَحِيل. Both of those are logically absurd. Both of those are mustahil aqlan. So Allah cannot break His promise, subhanahu wa ta'ala, because He has, it's based off of His pre-eternal knowledge, which cannot be not knowledge, it cannot be ignorance. And were He to break His promise, it would contradict what He knew in pre-eternity. And then it would also entail a type of lie, which is Allah ta'ala is transcendent above that. Also, breaking a promise is a deficiency in and of itself. Breaking a promise is a deficiency, according to the Arabs. This is something, okay, so that point, that Allah does not break His promise, this is agreed between the Asharis and Maturidis. This is the agreement between the Asharis and Maturidis, both are Ahl Sunnah. طيب, what about the divine threat? What about the wa'id? Can Allah break His threat? Can Allah Ta'ala break His threat? There's a bit of difference of opinion amongst the Asharis and Maturidis. And now, the difference of opinion with respect to the divine threat, can it be broken or not? It refers to sinful believers. The threat to sinful believers, okay? The threat to sinful believers. This is the issue. So the divine threat to sinful believers, that is the issue which there is a difference of opinion between the Asharis and Maturidis, both of whom are Ahl Sunnah. The divine threat to disbelievers, okay, the divine threat to disbelievers cannot be broken. There is agreement that cannot be broken. And the basis of that is Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran that إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ. Okay, Surah An-Nisa. Surah An-Nisa, verse 48. That Allah Ta'ala does not forgive that He be associated with, that there be shirk done with respect to Him. But He forgives other than that for whomsoever He wills. But He forgives other than that for whomsoever He wills. And what's important to understand with respect to that verse is that verse is considered, it gives the context for the other verse in Surah Az-Zumar, verse 53, where Allah Ta'ala says, قُلْ يَا عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ أَسْرَفُوا عَلَى أَنفُسِهِمْ, say, O my servants that have done excess against their own souls, لَا تَقْنَطُوا مِنْ رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ, do not despair from the mercy of Allah. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَغْفِرُ الذُّنُوبَ جَمِيعًا, verily, because verily Allah forgives all sins. Okay, so Allah Ta'ala says in Surah Al-Zumar that Allah forgives all sins. But in Surah An-Nisa, Allah clarified that Allah does not forgive shirk done to him, but He forgives other than that for whomsoever He wills. So the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, it gives the context for the ayah in Surah Al-Zumar. It has precedence over the ayah in Surah Al-Zumar. So the ayah in Surah Al-Zumar that Allah forgives all sins without exception has an exception, which is shirk. Okay? So that's why a person, and we talked about who is the kafir according to the Asharis, that a person that was a clear message was given to them, and they understood it. They had sound faculties of at least one of sight and hearing, and as well as intellect. And after understanding the message in a pristine way, they reject it. Okay, so that's the kafir or the mushrik. The Maturidis would say, well, even someone that did not receive the message has to be a muwahhid. The Maturidis would say even someone that did not receive the message has to be a monotheist. So were they to commit shirk, they're not excused. But if they're a monotheist, then they're saved. So that's quickly to understand who's meant by the mushrik according to the Asharis and Maturidis. So we know for certain that the divine promise to believers cannot be broken. And we know for certain that the divine threat to disbelievers cannot be broken. The issue of disagreement was the divine threat to sinful believers. Okay, the divine threat to sinful believers. So Imam Bajuri, he says, as for that divine threat, فَيَجُوزَ الْخُلْفِ فِيهِ عِنْدَ الْأَشَائِرَةِ, it's possible for the threat to be broken, that particular threat to sinful believers, for it to be broken according to the Asharis. Okay, according to the Asharis, the divine threat to sinful believers could be broken. Why? لِأَنَّ الْخُلْفِ فِيهِ لَا يُعَدُّ نَقْصًا, because breaking a threat is not considered a deficiency. The Arabs did not consider breaking a threat a deficiency. بَلْ يُعَدُّ كَرَمًا يُمْتَدَحْ بِهِ, rather it's considered a virtue for which someone is praised, a praiseworthy virtue. And he recites a line of poetry of one of the Arab poets said, وَإِنِّي وَإِنْ أَوْعَدْتُهُ أَوْعَدْتُهُ لَمُخْلِفُ إِعَادِي وَمُنْجِزُ مَوْعِدِي. One of the Arab poets said out of pride, he said, verily if I make a threat or make a promise, I shall certainly break my threat and I shall certainly fulfill my promise. So this was considered a praiseworthy thing in the understanding of the Arabs, which is embedded in their language, right? Because we have to appreciate that the Arabic language is intimately connected with Arabic cultural understandings, and that has to be the ulama looked at that when they examined the Quran, because the Quran, it's revealed Quranun Arabiyyun, an Arabic recital, so it is in the Arabic language. Some said, okay, hold on, what are you saying, O Asharis? This is problematic, because wouldn't that entail that Allah is lying when He makes the threat? All the ayat of the Quran and ahadith that threaten the believer that sins, if a believer does this sin, there's this much punishment, etc., etc. Wouldn't that entail that Allah was lying with that? And we know that Allah does not lie. The basic response is that the Asharis would say, they said, Al-Karim إِذَا أَخْبَرَ بِالْوَعِيدِ, when a noble, virtuous, entity, in this case, they're doing analogy in creation, a noble person amongst creatures, when he informs of a threat, when he makes a threat, فَاللَّائِقْ بِكَرِمِهِ أن يبنى إخباره به على المشيئة أو أن يبني إخباره به على المشيئة وإن لم يصرح بها. what's appropriate and suitable for his generosity and his nobility is that his informing of the threat is based off of an implicit mashi'ah. So it is implied that, he says, for example, لَوَعَذِبَنَّ زَيْدًا, I'm going to harm Zayd. His intention is in shi'tu, if I choose to do so. That the noble person in classical Arabic culture, that whenever they would make a threat, if they were noble, then there was an implicit, if I choose to do so. This is what the Asharis said. بِخِلَافِ الْوَعَدِ, as opposed to a promise of good. فَإِنَّ اللَّائِقْ بِكَرَمِهِ أَنْ يَبْنِيَ إِخْبَارُ بِهِ عَلَى الْجَزْمِ, because what's appropriate for generosity, virtue, and nobility when giving a promise of good is that it's based off of jazm. If you do this, I will reward you, because they're generous, without a doubt. They're not implying if I will. Whereas with the threat, there's an implication of if I choose to do so. So that's the Ashari response. The Maturidi said no. Just as with the promise of good for the believers that cannot be broken, so too the threat, the divine threat, cannot be broken. That's what the Maturidi said. They said there's no, it's the same issue, because their focus was on the truthfulness, the issue of truthfulness, and their perspective on that was an absolute manner. So what's the thamra? What's the result of this difference of opinion? Because what's interesting is that both the Asharis and Maturidis agree that any believer that commits a sin, and they don't make a sincere tawbah, any believer that commits a sin, a major sin, and they don't make a genuine heartfelt tawbah. And what do we mean by genuine heartfelt tawbah? What are the three conditions of a tawbah, according to Imam Nawawi and others? Sorry? To make a resolve or firm determination to not repeat it. Sorry? To feel remorse, which is really at the heart of it. A tawbah to nadam, the hadith says tawbah is remorse. So that's the most salient, to actually feel bad about it. And the third, to actually stop it. So to stop the sin, to feel genuine remorse for having committed it, and to make an internal resolve to not repeat it. And if it has to do with the huquq, the rights of others, then the fourth condition would be to rectify the right that was taken, to repay that or whatnot. So a major sin, if a believer commits a major sin, and if they make tawbah, then our hope in Allah is that the tawbah is accepted. And we'll talk about that later. It comes up in the Johara. But if they don't make tawbah, so a believer commits one or more major sins, and they do not make tawbah, they do not do that, and they die in that state. They die without having made tawbah for one or more major sins. Both the Asharis and Maturidis affirm, they're in agreement that such a person is in the mashi'ah of Allah. Such a person is in the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning what? If Allah chooses to take them to account for that sin, He can do so and put them temporarily in the fire. Why temporarily? Because they're still believers. And the hadith says, Man qala la ilaha illallah, dakhala al-jannah. Whoever died with la ilaha illallah will eventually, with their ultimate destination is paradise. But if Allah so chooses, He can overlook it, forgive it, pardon it, despite their not having made tawbah, and put them straight into paradise. This is what they mean, that such a person is in the mashi'ah. And this is based off of many texts of the Quran and Sunnah. As opposed to a believer who dies free of a major sin, or meaning they never committed it or they made tawbah from it, then based on what Allah has revealed, such a person is going to paradise. and as opposed to, as we said, a disbeliever that based off of what we defined, how we defined the disbeliever, that such a person is not in the Mashi'a. Allah has revealed that they are going to the hellfire. So both the Asharis and Maturidis agree that a sinful believer is who did not make tawbah is where? In the Mashi'a. So what are they debating then on the issue of the divine threat? But they both agree the person's in the Mashi'a. What was the disagreement right now on the divine threat? Does he have to fulfill it or not? So what did the Asharis say? It's possible that he not fulfill it. What did the Maturidis say? He must fulfill it. Well, they both agree that everyone is in the Mashi'a. Isn't there a contradiction? No, because the Mashi'a means Allah could choose to forgive them, meaning the divine threat was not fulfilled. So what are the Maturidis trying to say? What they're trying to say is that at least one person has to go to hell. At least one sinful believer has to go to hell for that sin. Because the divine threat cannot be absolutely unfulfilled. The Maturidis are saying the divine threat can be completely unfulfilled and no one has to go to hellfire. The Asharis. The Maturidis are saying that at least one sinful believer has to go to the fire. For everyone else, yeah, they're in the Mashi'a. But the divine threat has to be fulfilled at some level. And what's the minimal level for the divine threat to be fulfilled? One person in each category of sin. One person for zina, one person for riba, one person for one person. The Asharis say, no, based off of their understanding of karam, of nobility and virtue and generosity, based off the Arabic language / culture, the divine threat is already pinned aslan. Foundationally, it's pinned on the Mashi'a, meaning that it's conceivable that no sinful believer goes to the hellfire. So the issue is based off of the difference is with respect to at least one person for each category of sin. I think we're supposed to do Q&A at the end. So if you can kindly make a note of your questions, we'll inshallah, bi'idhnillah, it's in the Mashi'a of Allah, whether we address them or not. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah wa shukrillah. So, and it's gonna, inshallah, this will come up again in the Jawhara towards the end, so we'll revisit this issue, inshallah, so stay tuned. طيب. Line 47. فوز السعيد عنده في الأزل كذا الشقي ثم لم ينتقل. The sa'ada and shiqawa. Okay, sa'ada and shiqawa. What do those terms mean? What do those terms refer to? So, the Sa'id literally it means the happy one, felicitous, and Shaqi, the damned one, the miserable one. Linguistically, that's what the Sa'ada is felicity or happiness, Shaqawa is damnation and misery. And it has to do with paradise and hell, because what's the ultimate felicity or happiness? It's not Aristotle's eudaimonia of simply a fulfilling virtuous life. No, there is actually eternal consequences to those virtues, right? So that the sa'ada is the eternal bliss in paradise, and the sa'id is one who is there, and the shaqawa is eternal misery and damnation in the fire, wal-'iyadhu billah. And so the shaqi is one who is there. And we know that these ultimate destinations are written for each of us in pre-eternity, and the hadith specifically mentions in the very wombs of our mothers, right? In the very wombs of our mothers, along with the sustenance, the provision that Allah will give us, and the lifespans, and what's the fourth? Provisions, lifespans. Livelihood is provisions. That's what we're talking about. There's a fourth one. Huh? Lifespan. Sorry. See, the Mahdi will look it up. So this is Sa'ada and Shaqawa. So the Asharis and Maturidis, they just had a semantic difference here. Okay, that's the point that we need to address with this line. There was a semantic difference. So terms, okay, and there's no real difference when it comes to terminology. The belief is the same. There's just how are those terms used? There was a difference of opinion. So we'll just quickly mention that. Did you find the fourth thing? وعمله. Naam. So rizqihi wa ajalihi wa amalihi wa sa'idan aw shaqi. So the amal, the spiritual works. So the four things written in the womb: the livelihood, the provisions, rizq, the ajal, the lifespan, the amal, spiritual works, and the eternal destination. Okay, the eternal destiny, which was predestined, determined, written, known by the divine in pre-eternity, known and willed in pre-eternity. So the Maturidis, they use the term Sa'id or Shaqi for a person's current state in the world, for a person's current state in the world. So someone that's Muslim, who professes the Shahada, is openly Muslim, what would the Maturidis call him or her? Sa'id. And a person that is non-Muslim, openly non-Muslim, and does not profess the Shahada, what would the Maturidis call such a person? Shaqi. Tayyib. So if someone asked the Maturidis, can a human's state of sa'ada or shaqawa, of ultimate felicity or ultimate damnation, can it change in one's life? If a person were to ask the Maturidis, can the state of sa'ada or shaqawa change during the course of one's life? What would they say? Certainly. A non-Muslim can become Muslim, so the shaqi would become Sa'id, and a Muslim could, la qaddar Allah, apostate, and instead of Sa'id, they would be shaqi. The Asharis, they use the terms for the ultimate destiny, the ultimate destination. Okay, the final destination, which is unchanging. Okay, and it is manifested in one's final moment. It is manifested in this world in one's final moment. So the person that dies on Iman is, by the grace of Allah, eternally headed to paradise, and so that person is Sa'id. And a person that dies on kufr, walayadu billah, that person is destined for hellfire by Allah's justice, and that person is shaqi. So if a person were to ask the Asharis, can the state of sa'ada or shaqawa change with respect to a person, what would they say? No. The sa'ada and shaqawa do not change, according to the Asharis. Okay? Both the Asharis and Maturidis agree on the same aqidah, that a person can go in and out of Islam in this world, and a person's final destination, ultimate eternal destination, is based off of their final moment, Iman versus Kufr, which is a mirror or reflection of what was predestined in pre-eternity, what was determined, known and willed by Allah in pre-eternity. So there's agreement on the aqidah, but a difference in semantics or terminology, which is not significant. So this is one of the many, and some of the books, a person might find that the Ashari, they list over 70 differences between the Asharis and Maturidis. Some of the books list out over 70. Well, the later ulama, when they really examined those differences, they found the majority of them to be of this nature, semantic, which are not real, they're not substantive. And so they, like Tajuddin Subki rahimahullah, he narrowed the real differences that were not merely semantic. He narrowed them down to merely six. So that's why the two are considered really one and the same madhab, which is Sunni Islam, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So Imam Laqani rahimahullah, he presents the Ashari usage of the term, the Ashari definitions of the terms in this line. He says, Fawzu Sa'idi indahu fil azali. The triumph of the felicitous is indahu, is with the divine fil azal, in pre-eternity. Okay, the triumph of the felicitous is with Allah in His knowledge and what He wills in pre-eternity. Kada shaqiyu, the same is for the shaqi, the damned, walayadu billah. Thumma, and the next point regarding this, lam yantaqili, it does not change. It does not change over the course of one's life, because it's the terminology is used for eternal destination. There's a powerful hadith that allows us to reflect on really what it means that Allah, He knew and He willed in pre-eternity, before He created anything, our ultimate destinies. And this is from our belief, the qadr, the divine decree, that in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ is reported to have said, it's Sahih hadith, Inna Allah khalaqa khalqahu, verily Allah created His creation, ثُمَّ جَعَلَهُمْ فِي ظُلْمَةٍ, and then placed them in darkness, and then placed all of them in darkness. ثُمَّ أَخَذَ مِن نُورِهِ مَا شَاءَ, and then He took from His light however much He wanted, however much He willed. فَأَلْقَاهُ عَلَيْهِمْ, and then cast it upon them. فَأَصَابَ النُّورُ مَنْ شَاءَ أَنْ يُصِيبَهُ وَأَخْطَأَ مَنْ شَاءَ, and so the light struck whomsoever Allah willed for it to strike. وَأَخْطَأَ مَنْ شَاءَ, and it missed whomsoever Allah willed for it to miss. فَمَنْ أَصَابَهُ النُّورُ يَوْمَئِذٍ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَى, so whomever the light struck on that day will be guided. وَمَنْ أَخْطَأَ يَوْمَئِذٍ فَقَدْ ضَلَّ, and whomever the light missed on that day will be astray. فَلِذَلِكَ قُلْتُ, and for that reason I, the Prophet ﷺ, said, جَفَّ الْقَلَمُ بِمَا هُوَ كَائِنٌ, the pen is dried with respect to all that shall exist. The pen is dried, the ink is dried with respect to all that shall exist. So, that, and when we appreciate this, then, our whatever paltry spiritual works we can produce don't really have much significance. And one of the dangers of success in anything is ujub. One of the dangers of success in, spiritual pursuits, intellectual pursuits, academic pursuits, all sorts of pursuits, is to be impressed with oneself, and that it's not reflecting on the pre-eternal decree, and that it's all Allah's. It's the unfolding of Allah's decree. It makes us realize that Allah is the giver of tawfiq, Allah is the giver of light, Allah is the giver of triumph, Allah is the giver. Every single point of knowledge that we learn, Allah creates it. Every single thought that we have, Allah creates it. Every single intelligent response we produce, Allah creates it. Every word that's uttered by our mouths, Allah creates it. Every letter that comes out, Allah creates it. Every hand motion that we make, Allah creates it. Every stillness that we have, Allah creates it. Every time we may have a realization, Allah creates it. Every time we are motivated to do something good, Allah creates it. Every time we every single هذا خلق الله, this is the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's not really much to be impressed with when we look at ourselves. Naam. وعندنا للعبد كسب كلف ولم يكن مؤثرا في التعريف. There's two narrations of this line. It's either the second part is either, so the first part وعندنا للعبد كسب كلف, the second part is either ولم يكن مؤثرا في التعريف or به ولكن لا يؤثر فاعرف. Which one do you have? به ولكن لا يؤثر فاعرف. Okay. The other one is ولم يكن مؤثرا فلتعرف. And the meaning is the same. وعندنا, according to us, أهل السنة والجماعة, للعبد كسب. The servant has his kasb. The servant has his acquisition. Okay, which is the fruit of his irada, which is the fruit of his will. So when the will, the irada that Allah creates in us, when that faculty, when we use it to specify, determine, choose whatever we choose to do, the fruit of it, the conclusion of it, the finality of it is called a kasb. It's called the acquisition. When it's an azm, when it's a full determination, and we are responsible for our azm. Okay, we are responsible for what we resolve, what we finalize internally to do. Even if Allah Ta'ala does not create that act, the qudra and its simultaneous qudra, even if Allah Ta'ala does not create that, the azam we are responsible for. So laha ma kasabat wa alayha ma iktasabat. The soul has for it all the good that it acquires, its final resolutions, and against it is all of the evil that it acquires, its final resolutions. So وَعِنْدَنَا لِلْعَبْدِ, the lam there, the abd has, it's his possession, the abd has and therefore is responsible for kasb, his acquisition, kullifa, and that's the basis of taklif, that's the basis of moral responsibility, religious responsibility. So kullifa bihi, he is made responsible thereby, bihi, thereby. Walakin la yu'athir, however, it has no ontological effect. It has no ontological effect. There's no ta'thir. Ta'thir is literally to cause or create an athar, an effect. And so, walakin la yu'athir, the kasb, that resolve, the resolution that is the conclusion of our irada, of our will, it has no ontological effect. It does not create anything. Okay? It is simply chronologically first before the action. So it has a chronological precedence or chronological value, but it has no ontological effect. It does not create the action. It does not create any result. وَلَكِنْ لَا يُؤَثِّرْ فَأَعْرِفَ. So realize this. This is the really, because every religion, every philosophy struggles with, to this day, struggles with this issue of freedom and freedom versus determination, or how free are we? Are we determined in any way? And what Ahl Sunnah did is they focused more on ontology. What's the basis of things coming into existence? Because there is an irada, it works, it's real, and the person chooses, but that choice does not create. And so Allah is the creator. Wallahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun. In the Quran, Allah Ta'ala says, Wallahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun. That Allah creates you and all that you do. Allah creates you and your actions. So, like we said last time, that the kasb is like a petition. It's like a petition to the divine. And if Allah also willed in pre-eternity for that action to exist, He will create subsequently chronologically thereafter, immediately thereafter, the action with its concomitant qudra or ability. So the Jabariya, the ones that said we are compelled, we are like puppets under a string of a puppet master and we have no choice, they rejected taklif. They rejected taklif because they did not acknowledge kasb. They did not acknowledge our irada, our will, and the conclusion of that will, which is acquisition of actions. The Qadariya or the Mu'tazila, they gave human ontological power. And so they said the human qudra is what creates the action. The human irada, it actually, then with it is a human qudra, human power that creates the action. And so it's all on the human being. So Ahl Sunnah Tawassatu, they adopted this median position that there is a kasb, and that's the basis of taklif. Okay, so that's the rebuttal to the Jabariya, that's the rebuttal to the determinists, those that said we are determined. No, we have kasb, and so therefore we are morally responsible. Okay, we are morally responsible. But there's no ta'thir of that kasb, there's no effect to create, and there's no ability, it does not create an effect, there's no ontological effect of that kasb, and that's the response, that's the rebuttal to the Mu'tazila or the Qadariya, the ultra-rationalists that really gave precedence to human power over divine power. They gave precedence to human power over divine power. So the term fi'l, the term action or performance of an act in Arabic, is a term that can be used for two different meanings. Okay? It's a term that can be used for two different meanings. That if the term is used for, ontologically, if it's used for creation, to create the act, fi'l, to do the act, i.e. create the act, then who is the only fa'il? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Imam Ghazali says, La fa'il illallah. There is no fa'il other than Allah. He's speaking ontologically. There is no creator of works or of action except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if it's used for performance vis-a-vis acquisition, performance vis-a-vis the conclusion of the creature's choice, then who is the fa'il of their own act? The person. The person is the fa'il of their own act. So that term has two different usages, and one has to be careful with how it's used. So 49, فَلَيْسَ مَجْبُورًا. Therefore, based off of kasb, based off of acquisition, the human is not majbur. He is not, compelled. He is not compelled. The only compulsion we have is that we are forced to choose. Okay, the only compulsion we have is that we are forced to choose because we have irada. We have this ability to choose, and so we are forced to choose. وَلَا اخْتِيَارَ. Now, the la there is still grammatically being affected by the laysa. The la is being grammatically affected by the laysa. So you have a double negation, which is an affirmation. So what's being affirmed? Ikhtiyar. So he's saying the human is not majbur, he is not compelled. وَلَا اخْتِيَارَ. Nor is he not free, i.e. he has choice. He has choice. وَلَيْسَ كُلًّا يَفْعَلُ اخْتِيَارًا. But it's not that all of his acts are done based off of his choice, because there are involuntary actions. Okay, like a hand tremor, for example. A person can do things again despite their will, despite their choice. Today in neurobiology, they've done many studies that clearly indicate that they did studies, and the subjects under that study, they timed the moment that they made their decisions, the moment that they made their decisions for particular actions. And there was a signal in the brain. There was a signal in the brain at that particular point in time. And what they found consistently is that several hundred milliseconds before that signal, which is in the world of neurons is a long, long time, there was another signal that occurred before it. There was another signal that occurred before it, that when a person consciously made a decision, several hundreds of milliseconds before that, there was another signal that happened. And the scientists are bewildered by this. And many of them are determinists because of that. But it doesn't contradict our aqidah. You know, we don't pin our beliefs on the latest scientific discovery because they could adjust it as they do more studies. But if that's the case, we know that at every moment Allah is enabling us. And even our irada is created. Even our will to choose is created. And Allahu Alam what that means, but alhamdulillah, our pristine aqidah is not challenged by that. So they have books out now, Freedom and Neurobiology. Freedom and Neurobiology. They have books like that are out. So فَلَيْسَ مَجْبُورًا وَلَا اخْتِيَارًا وَلَيْسَ كُلًّا. Imam Ghazali, one of the things Imam Ghazali talks about in this discussion, he says, basically the meaning of which is, you have to be careful with the term free though. Okay, we affirm will, and it is our faculty, so we are quote unquote free to choose it. But at the same time, you know, why did all of you show up today? MashaAllah. Let me ask you all. Why did you come today? Because Imam Zayd. MashaAllah. So, because Imam Zayd was here. Alhamdulillah. It's a good answer. I would do the same. But, tayyib. Well, why come if Imam Zayd's here? Benefit. Okay, benefit. So, what motivated you to choose to come here? Ultimately, it went back to? No, you used your will to choose to come here. But why did you choose to come here? Why did you use your will in that manner? Benefit. You perceived benefit. طيب. La qadar Allah, you know, you go outside your house one day and there's some sort of threat. Is it a big dog that's barking at you or something? And la qadar, and so you get scared. What do? Go back inside, shut the door, lock it. Okay, did you choose to do that? You could have chosen not to do that. So you did choose to do that. But what motivated you? What pushed you? What moved you to choose that choice? A threat of what? Harm. A threat of harm. So ultimately, our choices, what if a person is sane and rational, what informs all of his choices? Benefit and harm. Seeking more benefit and avoiding any harm. طيب. How do we know what entails benefit and what entails harm? What faculty in us enables that? Intelligence as well as knowledge. Intelligence as well as knowledge. Aql and ilm. Aql and ilm. Well, who creates our ilm? Allah creates our ilm. And who opens for us the experiences by which we gain that ilm? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who gave us our aql? Okay, who made our aql such that it is able to perceive benefit and harm? People that make bad decisions and harm themselves, those faculties are less refined and less fine-tuned, and they end up hurting themselves. And if you really dig deep, Imam Ghazali says, you'll find this whole universe of factors that are, we like to think they're in our control, but they're not really very much in our control. That our irada, it's true, we believe in an irada and we're responsible for our kasb, but there's a whole lot going on that informs our motivations. There's a whole lot that's going on that informs our impulses and our perception of benefit and harm, due to which we act. And so we have choice, and it's not compelled. So if that's what we mean by free will, then we affirm it. But we have to be careful with the term free, because the awliya and the anbiya alayhim salam, everything that the sharia prescribes, they perceive the benefit of it. They perceive the benefit of it. And everything that the sharia interdicts or prohibits, they perceive the harm of it. They perceive the harm of it, because their lens, the lens of their understanding, the lens of their perspectives is eternal. That what are the eternal consequences of these actions? What are the eternal consequences? Man raqab al-awaqib salim, right? That one of our masters said, whoever is keeping track or focusing, whoever is focusing, examining al-awaqib, the eternal consequences and the eventual outcomes of things, salim, will prove safe. And so this is what we seek, is tawfiq to do that, inshallah. So فَإِن يُثِبْنَا 50, if he rewards us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَبِمَحْدِ الْفَضْلِ, and it's out of pure grace. وَإِن يُعَذِّبْ, and if he chooses to punish, فَبِمَحْدِ الْعَدْلِ, then it's out of pure justice. Everything vacillates between divine grace and divine justice. Everything vacillates between divine grace and divine justice, whether in this world or the next. So paradise is the ultimate madhar, it's the ultimate manifestation, it's the most absolute manifestation of divine grace. And the hellfire is the ultimate madhar, it's the ultimate manifestation, the most absolute manifestation of divine justice. And nothing is unjust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's not an iota of injustice from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, there's not an iota, whether in this life or the next. There's not an iota, not an atom, not a cork, not a string. If there's a string, there's not one bit of injustice from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Laysa bidh-dhallami lil-abid. He is not unjust whatsoever to his creatures. So it is pure justice. And this obviously that because with the problem of evil and suffering in the world, that we don't see or we don't realize the eternal consequences, and this is why it's difficult. If it were only dunya, if this realm were the only realm of existence, the problem of evil or suffering would be a real problem. Okay, the problem of suffering would be a real problem, because that's it. It's just a lifetime and then extinction. So why all the pain? But because we believe in an akhirah, we believe in the realm of eternity, and that informs all of the events in this world, then suffering is not a theological problem. It's just a matter of having the iman to trust in Allah during the suffering. And we're by no means belittling that. That's a tremendous thing. And we don't ask for suffering, we ask for afiyah. But, as our masters say, that when Umayyah bin Khalaf, when this vicious tyrant of the Quraysh was torturing Bilal al-Habashi, our master Bilal radhiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and placing the boulder on top of his chest, that in all day long, from morning till evening, out in the desert, in scorching heat, such that the boulder, according to one narrator, the boulder was so hot that he said, were I to put some meat on it in the middle of the day, it would have cooked. The boulder on the chest of our master Bilal was so hot that he said, this narrator said, were I to put meat on it, it would have cooked. And then leaving them to the riffraff of the town, the teenagers, who then took rope around Sayyidina Bilal's neck, Allah be pleased with him, and dragged him with horses across the streets. The young, like, the shabab that were like punks, gang members. These kind of people, completely, just unbearable, unimaginable torture. And the whole time, many Sahaba, they said, we'll say whatever you want, which in that situation is allowed in the Sharia. And so they said, say Lat and Uzza is your God. They said Lat and Uzza is our God. They did it. They said we were in so much pain. Had they said say that insect is your God, they would have said that insect is my God, just to stop it. And the ayah came down that as long as iman was firm in the heart, there's nothing wrong with that. And those Sahaba are not blamed for that. Allah be pleased with them all. But Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhu is the one that did not let go. His speech was too valuable to just hand it over to these people. And so he said, Ahad, Ahad, the whole time. Ahad, Ahad. That our masters say, don't think that Umayyah and those teenagers had the upper hand and Bilal was suffering. Don't think that they had the upper hand and Bilal was suffering. Bilal, at those moments, was soaring up in the darajat of paradise. He was soaring up in the degrees of paradise, unimaginable degrees. And Umayyah and his minions were plummeting in the depths of the fire at that moment. They were plummeting in the depths of the fire. This is man raqab al-awaqib. These are the awaqib. This is translating events in the world to their eternal destinations, to their eternal consequences. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. The ultimate destination is for the people of taqwa. وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. So anytime we see suffering, anytime we see, there's no problem of suffering in our history, in Islamic tradition. There was never a problem of suffering or problem of evil. Theodicy was not a problem. Because anyone with a working relationship with the Quran and Sunnah, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, even a thorn that pricks us, there's ajr. Sins are being removed. And so what about and this does not mean that we're fatalist, that we're quietist, that we don't struggle against injustice, that we don't struggle against the difficulties and the suffering of the world. No, we struggle because Allah has demanded that from us. So, فَإِنْ يُثِبْنَا, if Allah rewards us, فَبِمَحْدِ الْفَضْلِ وَإِنْ يُعَذِّبْ فَبِمَحْدِ الْعَدْلِ. And the mahd al-fadl, we have to remember that the hadith says, لَنْ يَدْخُلَ أَحَدُكُمْ الْجَنَّةِ بِعَمَلِهِ, that none of you shall enter paradise by his spiritual works. None of you shall enter paradise by his spiritual works. قَالُوا وَلَا أَنْتَ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. They said, and not even you, O Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. قَالْ وَلَا أَنَا, not even me. إِلَّا إِنْ يَتَغَمَّدِيَنَ اللَّهُ بِرَحْمَةٍ مِنْهُ وَفَضْلٍ, أو كما قال, until and unless Allah Ta'ala completely envelops and submerges me in divine grace and mercy. That it's bimahd al-fadli. Paradise is by pure grace. And even the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, informing us that his entrance to paradise is based off of Allah's rahmah. And, because the ni'am are so many, that the man in Bani Israel, he said, he worshipped for 500 years and didn't commit a single sin. And then on Yawm al-Qiyamah, Allah says, I shall put you in paradise because of my grace, because of my mercy. And the man says, La bi'amali. He says, no, by my works. I didn't mess up a single time. I was worshipping for 500 years. And Allah Ta'ala says, okay, by your works, then bring the mawazin, bring the scales. And so the angels bring the scales. And on one side, 500 years of worship without a single sin is placed, and on the other side, the ni'mah of vision, the blessing of eyesight on the opposite scale, and they're both balanced. And then Allah Ta'ala says, shall I continue? And the man says, Bifadlik, Ya Allah, bifadlik. No, by your grace, Ya Allah, by your grace. So it's bimahd al-fadli. And if there's any questions, inshallah, we'll endeavor. No.
To go back to the Shia point, was the Maturidi saying, when the Maturidi group, when they say that at least one person has to go to hell for a category of sin, was that to not violate the law of contradiction?
When the Maturidi position that at least one person has to go to Jahannam for sin, was that to not violate the law of non-contradiction? That, well, yeah, they said that, yeah, in a way, because they said that breaking any statement is a lie, and there's a contradiction entailed in that. Allah logically cannot lie, because it's based off of His knowledge. His statements emanate from His knowledge, which is perfect. So lying is inconceivable, logically inconceivable for the divine. And so the threat must be fulfilled, even if just one person. Does that make sense? What would the Asharis respond? Yeah, it's not a lie. The Asharis would say it's not a lie, because it's implied, if I will. In shi'tu is implied. Like we say, insha'Allah, Allah, whenever He made a threat, the Asharis said His threat was always with an implicit, in shi'tu, if I choose to, I shall cast to hell. And so there is no lie, so there is the law of non-contradiction is not broken. No.
Related to that question, so if that's what the Asharis say about inshallah related to threats, then why is it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the Asharis agree with the Maturidis that the threat will be fulfilled in terms of disbelievers going to hellfire? And then related to that, we also said that for sinful believers, that there's a contradiction, because there's a contradiction with the Maturidis, because the Maturidis say that he will fulfill his threat for sinful believers, but Asharis say he can not fulfill it. Doesn't that same logic apply to the other category?
Could you repeat the last part, the second half?
So we said there's a contradiction. The Asharis say there's a contradiction in the Maturidi concept of fulfilling his threat regarding sinful believers. Sinful believers are threatened by Allah that they will be punished. Maturidi say he will fulfill that. Asharis say no, he can retract that and go back on that.
Not that he can retract that, but he is not breaking anything, because it was implied that it was if he willed.
So why doesn't that same logic?
Why doesn't it apply to disbelievers? Okay. Well, yeah, fine. That's a good question. So his question is, we made we divided the issue into three categories of people. There's obedient believers who don't sin, or who make tawbah from their sins. May Allah make us all amongst them. And we said that the promise is fulfilled with certainty for paradise. Then disbelievers, and we said the threat is fulfilled with certainty for hellfire. And then the middle was sinful believers, and this is where the disagreement was. The Maturidis were consistent with the way they viewed the issue with the other two categories. The Asharis had a different understanding, different perspective with that category. So, question is, why according to the Asharis, is that what you're asking? Why didn't the Asharis see the other two categories in the same way? Is that your question?
Why do we insist there's a contradiction related to the Mashiach and Maturidi's position regarding sinful believers, but we don't insist that same contradiction related to disbelievers?
Not the Maturidis, you mean the Asharis, right? Because there's no contradiction with the Maturidis with the Mashiach. Okay. The Maturidis were saying the Asharis have a contradiction because they're allowing a statement to be broken.
No, I'm sorry. So I thought we said that you posed the question that the Asharis were all in the Mashiach of Allah. We're always in the Mashiach of Allah. So for sinful believers, there is a threat that they are going to be punished.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood that you posed the question saying, well, is there a contradiction? Can they be in the Mashiach, but he doesn't have the ability to go back on that threat or not fulfill.
That's why we said at least one has to be punished. That's how you get out of that contradiction. So let's repeat it real quick. So for obedient believers, it's a promise of paradise. And a promise, according to the Arabs, is never broken. It's not from virtue or nobility to break a promise, ever. Okay, there's no implicit if I will. I will reward you with X. If I choose to, that would not be a noble trait. That would be a bad trait. So the Sunnis are in agreement that the promise, liman arad, for whomever Allah wills, will be fulfilled. I shouldn't say that because it's going to confuse. For whomever is obedient. Okay, all the obedient believers, that the promise will be fulfilled. Make sense? Okay, why? Because it would entail a lie. Okay, because it would contradict pre-eternal knowledge and what Allah has informed us. Okay, the disbelievers that Allah has said explicitly He does not forgive shirk. He does not forgive shirk. Okay, so He has informed us of that. So that qualifies that whole discussion. Okay, whereas with the sinful believers, there's agreement that it's in the Mashi'ah. Allah, they die without tawbah. It's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has informed us that He shall choose what to do with them. The issue is, can the threat be broken? Absolutely, in the sense that everyone is forgiven. Which would then entail, it would be different from what appears from those texts. The Asharis say it's fine because it doesn't contradict what appears of those texts, because those texts have an implicit inshit to it, if I will. So there's no contradiction. The Maturidis did not agree in that implicit meaning, and so they said there is a contradiction, so at least one must be punished. That's why the Asharis allow us to make forgiveness for all the Muslims for all their sins. Asharis say, you can say, Allahumma gfirli jami' al-muslimin li jami' al-dhunub. The Maturidis would say, you can't make that dua. Because Allah has revealed that one person at least, minimally, must undergo the threat. Okay. And on the issue of the mushrik going to the fire, there is ijma' on this as well. It's an issue of ijma'. So both textually and based on logic, as well as what we've inherited, it's an absolute issue. You know.
So why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we say that regarding His threat that He will not forgive shirk, why do we say that one is absolute but the others are not?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why, for the ayah that Allah does not forgive shirk, do we say it's an absolute? There's no implicit if I will. Whereas for the other threats, there's an implicit if I will. You know, yeah, immediately what comes to mind is just it's an issue of ijma', that there is a consensus on that. This is a point of a fundamental point of creed that we don't, the Muslims did not budge on this issue. As for other than that, you know, let me try to look it up, inshallah, for next week. But what comes to mind right now is because of the ijma', the consensus on this matter. No. Mm-hmm.
So we talk about that there is the will to do something, and there's also why you want to do something, right?
Right.
The idea that goes behind it, that either qualifies it, that multiplies it, or can nullify it.
Okay.
And so you have, and once stone, which you cannot undo. But the intention or the why one did that
Mhm.
in a state of flux.
Right.
It's volatile. So at the end of it, like, is Kesp just as Kesp and Tawbah in the understanding of the scholars? Is that also volatile? Or is that the final, because one could give into or keep the ujub or riyah and, and lose the Kesp, or they could do istighfar and then potentially read it back. I mean, so it could be constantly changing. I mean, just for a single act. So when their scholars are referring to Kesp, is that the final state of that deed when one dies? And is tawbah that, or is it something that again could change with one's?
MashaAllah. I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, but so you're saying that the niyyah could change after the action? How so?
I mean,
So someone, let's say, read a book so that they could show off to others how smart they are. Okay. So they did that, the act is done. The niyyah is final, right? How could the niyyah change? Before an act, the niyyah could change. Right up to the point they start reading, they say, you know what, rather I want to do this for the sake of Allah. They change their niyyah and then they do the act. But once an act is done, the niyyah is recorded, the kasb is recorded, the action is recorded, and now all we have left, if something was wrong, is what? Tawbah, to go edit it and have it erased, inshallah.
like, so potentially one says the intention is like reading books to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then one says, hey, in conversations like, oh, I like that. So in that state.
That's a different action.
Like,
Yeah, so the question is, let's say someone, for example, intended to read a book to please Allah, and they did that act, and then later in conversation, they talk about it for the wrong reasons. Didn't their niyyah change? No, that's a new action. Speaking about the book or what knowledge they gained is a different action that has its own consequence. Their first action is done with its niyyah, with its kasb, with everything.
So you can't change the intention. So even if
You can make tawbah. Yeah, so when an action is done with its intention, its acquisition, and the act itself, it's done. It's a done deal. Time is gone, and we cannot unchange it. But we can make tawbah. And at-ta'ib min adh-dhanb kaman la dhanba lahu. The Prophet says, the one that makes genuine tawbah from a sin is like the one that never committed the sin. And in fact, other hadith would indicate Allah loves them more. Because the Prophet says that were you not to sin, Allah would replace you with people that sin and make tawbah. Because Allah loves tawbah so much. And inshallah we'll talk about tawbah later. But not to encourage sin, a'udhu billah, but that we with our weakness we go to Allah broken and just begging for tawbah. This is something Allah loves for us to transform in repentance. So when an action is done, it's done, but the tawbah allows us to edit, and the person of tawbah is the same, if not higher, than the one that never slipped. So it's a tremendous mercy. Inshallah, no. Yeah, walaysa. Mm-hmm. The question was if someone wanted to negate each one, how would they do it in Arabic? Walaysa majburan, walaysa mukhtaran, you would say, for example. Or walaysa majburan wa mukhtaran, for example. Mm.
The other question is, and maybe this is the question, how do we look at istikhara? Because there is.
Yeah, so the istikhara, how do we understand istikhara? Istikhara is asking Allah Ta'ala to place goodness in, it's seeking the goodness of a decision. It's seeking that benefit. So it's asking Allah that, maybe we can inshallah start with this next time, but basically that, it's a tremendous sunnah, the hadith about istikhara, the Sahaba said, Allah be pleased with them, that the Prophet ﷺ would teach it to us like an ayah of the Quran. Okay, and one of the habits of the people of Allah is that they make a lot of istikhara. So the istikhara, the way I was taught, is that when a person is facing decision A versus B or not A, that they go ahead and use their istishara, consult people, use their intellect, try to determine what has more benefit and less harm, and start in that path, like head and make that decision. And then once they're saying inclining towards decision A, they pray an istikhara, so that asking Allah that this be good for me, to place good in it, and to make its outcome good for my livelihood and my final outcome, and that if it's bad for me and my livelihood, etc., then to somehow intervene, that either the door closes or my heart, something happens to me and I can't do it for whatever reason. And so because if you're at 50-50, you're not stating what issue you're asking Allah to help you with, but you'll go ahead and head towards it internally and then make the istikhara. And then if you pursue it and that's what happens, even if things don't necessarily work out the way you had planned, you know that that's good for you, so that you trust Allah Ta'ala. And so you may not perceive the benefit, but you know that there's benefit, even if it didn't work out the way you had planned or hoped. For example, so it's like it's an insurance policy. Istikhara is your best insurance policy, that you're covered. You're 100% coverage by Allah Ta'ala. But inshallah, maybe we can talk about it in more detail next class. So we ask Allah to accept. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad an-nabiyul ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.
Ustaz Faraz, I'm sorry. Can I just take one question from online?
Inshallah, ahlan wa sahlan.
Okay.
I just felt that
sorry.
you all
So Osgood asks, we know that tawbah and following the sin with good deeds washes the sin away. So in this case, would the Muslim be in the Mashiach or in the obedient servants group?
Yeah, so when a person makes tawbah, genuine tawbah for a sin, then we believe that it's wiped out. Allah Ta'ala erases that sin or forgives them for it. And of course, if the tawbah is genuine, then we'll strive to do other good deeds afterwards to make up for the slip or the mistake. So then they would be amongst the obedient believers. Yeah. So the sinful believer, like we said, the sinful believer is someone that dies having committed a major sin without making tawbah. Died having committed a major sin without making tawbah. Because sagha'ir, unless one persists, inshallah, those are forgiven by wudu, etc. Prayer, Jummah.
Okay, thank you. And then there was a second one that Marcus asked. Someone said that a perfect being will have no need for anything, but in the Quran it says that Allah has wants. How would you respond to this?
Could you repeat it? Sorry.
He said that someone said that a perfect being will have no need for anything, but in the Quran it says that Allah has wants. How would you respond?
Allah has wants?
Yeah.
Like Allah wants to do things, yuridullah, like that.
Yeah, I wish you had put maybe a reference. I thought it would have made it more precise.
No, yeah, the Quran says that. So yeah, Allah is perfect. He has no need whatsoever. This is our belief, absolute belief. And the Quran itself calls Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Ghani. Al-Ghani, the one without any need whatsoever. Okay, he says, Allah Ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas antumul fuqara ila Allah wallahu huwal ghaniyul hamid. O humanity, all of you are in utter need of Allah, and Allah alone is independent, free of need. Al-Ghaniyu, Al-Hamid, deserving of all praise. So Allah has no need whatsoever. When Allah says that He wants things from us, for example, that i.e., this is where His good pleasure lies. He rewards for it. Okay, it could mean He either wills that thing, He chooses, Allah wants good for us, He chooses good for us, He creates good for us, or that Allah wants us to do righteous deeds, meaning that Allah's good pleasure and reward and love is entailed by those deeds. So it's not that Allah is in want, i.e. in need. Allah does not need our good deeds. Allah does not need anything from us, subhanahu wa ta'ala, but rather He rewards. And so He expresses it as want, quote unquote. Does that make sense, inshallah? Anything else?
The last one, there was just three. So the last one was, there's a little misunderstanding of wording, I think, perhaps on my part, but it just reads, does everyone in this day and time get the message of Allah's oneness, or are some excluded since our Master Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came 1435 years ago? Not.
Yeah. So, that's a hard question. How much does a person have to hear? Allahu Alam. I mean, Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah, he felt that at his time, many citizens of the non-Muslim empires would be saved. They would be forgiven. Excused is the proper word. They would have a divine amnesty, because they either did not hear about the Prophet ﷺ, or what they heard about him ﷺ was a false, something negative, something that was not true of his character. So sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he felt that, he said it would not be surprising, it would not be far-fetched that the majority of those non-Muslim lands would be forgiven. In our time, how much do people know? Allahu Alam. I mean, I was at a restaurant once a long time ago, and I had a book on Islam. I remember the book, and the waitress came and said, "Oh, you're Muslim?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Oh, so you guys believe Muhammad is God, right?" That's what she said to me, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I clarified, but if that's all she had heard, then she would be correct in rejecting Islam. If that was her tasawwur, her conception of Islam, that a man named Muhammad claimed to be God, then it would be correct for her to reject that. She would be correct in rejecting that. So, I'm not sure what people know today, and how much, at what point is it, is it such that it's an issue now of salvation versus eternal damnation? But certainly it's on us to clarify and to spread the message. And one of the amazing things about Allah's plan and His decree and His wisdom is that oftentimes when there's a fitna, when there's a trial or a tension in a society such that people are bad-mouthing religion, people are bad-mouthing Islam, like it happened at the time of the Quraysh. They would go around spreading rumors about the Prophet ﷺ. Anytime pilgrims would come in, they'd go say, "Don't listen to Muhammad ﷺ. He is a madman, astaghfirullah. They would make up these lies about him. He's kada wa kada, sorcerer," and they would say all these things. And so don't listen to him. So a lot of times, like today, people saying all these bad things about Islam, a lot of times that's the way Allah puts the word in people's minds, that they're actually a means for da'wah. Because now all these people hear about Islam is this, Islam is that, so many of them will want to know, well, what is Islam? And so that's the first step in them coming to learn about Islam. And so we have to trust Allah. Wallahu mutimmu nuri. Allah says He is the completer of His light. He promises He shall complete His light. Walau kariha al-kafirun, walau kariha al-mushrikun. Even if the enemies of His light despise it. So, our job is simply to convey the message and to the best of our ability to teach. لِيُبَلِّغَ الشَّاهِدَ الْغَائِبِ. Let the one that knows and witnesses inform the one that's absent. As for each person and how much they have to know and what they know and what their psychological state was and etc. etc. Allah is the judge. Allah is the only judge, really. You know, people today, even the mention of religion turns off so much internally for them. You know, so Allahu Alam. I'm not comfortable answering that question. I don't know. Khalas, inshallah.
Barakallah feek. Lots of salams and supplications from our online audience. Appreciate it.
Wa alaikum assalam jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we ask Allah Ta'ala to accept and to make us worthy of this religion, to give us tawfiq, and to be people that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad an nabiyul ummi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.